Hey, this is Dr. Garcia, and this is your lecture on systematic review and meta analysis. And we will be going over the process from conception to evaluating actual articles. For our lecture objectives, at the end of this session, you will be able to recall techniques and methodologies previously discussed on the synthesis of research, particularly on systematic review and meta analysis. And we are hoping that you'll be able to discuss the process of writing, or at least know the basic steps in writing or beginning a systematic review using the PRISMA 2020 checklist as a guide, and to also know the process of how to evaluate published systematic reviews and meta-analysis using the AMSTAR 2 checklist or appraisal tool as your guide. Now, as we all know, research is about creating and discovering new things. And the process of doing a systematic review and meta-analysis is no different, although you're technically building up on previously discovered or done research. Now, for this lecture, I will start with an overview or an introduction, a review of previous concepts that you've learned on systematic review and synthesis of research. And then we will be going over some essential parts of the PRISMA 2020 checklist and the AMSTAR 2 checklist. Now, let's first look into the review on the synthesis of research, and I will also go over some very important or critical points in the history of doing systematic reviews. Now, in your previous lecture, it was already discussed that the synthesis of research is basically the integration of existing knowledge in research pertinent to an issue. So basically, you have a new research question and you want to synthesize or look at existing data. Now, your research question may be similar to previous research questions in this regard, but you're building up on new knowledge. And your aim is, of course, to increase the generality and applicability of all findings through your integration. So you're basically improving or adding on to previously held knowledge. So here you can see the hierarchy of evidence where we present the quality of evidence of different types of research designs. And as you can see, systematic reviews are at the top because of its integrative nature. So basically, it builds upon the other layers due to its design. So the quality of evidence and the strength of evidence is basically stronger in systematic reviews. Now, what is the difference between a systematic review and meta-analysis? So you probably read articles that actually interchange sometimes or combine these two terms, but they are different designs actually. Now, to represent this visually, I present this figure. So basically shows that the meta-analysis may be part of a systematic review and a meta-analysis may be possible without doing a systematic review, wherein you could just find or locate few studies and calculate the result with no attempt at systematization about how you select the particular study. So the keyword in systematic review is a system. Now, in based on Cochrane, the term systematic review refers to the entire process of collecting, reviewing, and presenting all available evidence, while the term meta-analysis refers to the statistical technique involved in extracting and combining data to produce a summary result. Now, as shown in this Venn diagram, there are overlaps in their characteristics, but again, these are two distinct designs. Now, what is a systematic review? Now, it is a design that basically attempts to collate, so you collect all empirical evidence that fits a specific eligibility criteria. So you're very selective about which evidence or studies you'll include in your review, specifically aimed at answering a new query, or it can be an old query that requires new answers or new applications. It is a type of review or a study that uses explicit systematic methods specifically to minimize bias because remember when you're doing systematic review, you're basically deciding on which factors or variables, same as you would do a research. But in this particular design, there's a very high risk for bias. So being systematic about it would probably help you reduce those biases. Now, in contrast, what is a meta-analysis then? So, as previously mentioned, there is a statistical analysis of a large collection of analysis results from individual studies for the main purpose of integrating the findings. It is a quantitative estimation of the magnitude of effect and its uncertainty as prescribed by the confidence limits. Hence, the term meta. So it's a research study on research study. So you're basically doing a research on research. Now, where did this all begin? So it started actually with a great debate in 1952 wherein a certain Hans Eysenck basically concluded that there were no favorable effects of psychotherapy, which actually initiated a very long-standing debate which lasted about 20 years, wherein several studies failed to resolve or answer the, the debate. However, in 1978, uh, Mr. Gene Glass statistically aggregated the findings of 375 psychotherapy outcome studies and concluded that psychotherapy did indeed work. And this method was then called a meta-analysis. Now, the basic or the essence of meta-analysis actually started earlier in 1904 with Carl Pearson, who basically averaged correlations for studies of the effectiveness of inoculation for typhoid fever. And then, as the years went on, this particular method was then improved by W.G. Cochrane, who basically discussed the method of averaging means across independent studies, and which then laid out the statistical foundation of the modern meta-analysis. This was further improved by Sir Archie Cochrane, wherein 3,500 articles of controlled clinical trials were gathered in a registry and summarized in about 600 systematic reviews. And then in the 1990s, there was a Cochrane collaboration who basically came up with a lot of the guides we use in research today. Now that we've explored previous concepts that were taught to you, as well as looked into the history of the systematic analysis in systematic review and meta-analysis, let's go on to the process of writing one using the PRISMA 2020 statement. Now, what is PRISMA? So what does it stand for? It basically stands for Preferred Reporting Items for Systematic Reviews and Meta-Analysis. Its purpose is to improve transparency, completeness, and reproducibility of systematic review reporting. And the 2020 statement actually reflects advancements or revisions since 2009. Now, the PRISMA 2020 basically covers for systematic reviews of health interventions, but is applicable to other fields and different review objectives such as articles on etiology, prognosis, etc. Now, it's useful for both original and updated or living systematic reviews and is a 27-item checklist and also includes a checklist of 12 items for the abstract and a flow diagram for study selection process. So they basically gave you guides already for doing a systematic review. Now, what are the stages of doing a systematic review or a meta-analysis? So basically, the steps are quite similar to how you would do your research. First is you formulate the review question or the research question. You define the population of the study. The only difference here is that your population are not human participants, but studies. So with this, you also need a very exhaustive inclusion and exclusion criteria so you can um, reveal or basically determine how you would sift through millions upon millions of articles. Next is you develop a specific search strategy and locate study. So you have to be, again, you have to be very systematic about this. So the strategy or your methodology should be well defined. Okay. Next is, of course, you select your studies, you extract the data, you assess the study quality of the individual studies, and of course, your own study. You analyze and interpret results, and again, you disseminate findings. Now, in doing your meta-analysis or systematic review, you have what is called scoping the literature, which is you look for existing SR or meta. Okay, now, a recent systematic review is considered recent if its search was conducted no later than 3 years before the present time. However, reviews can also be done for searches that are done more than 3 years, only allowed if the review addresses the current policy question and there are no new studies, information, or development in that particular field. Okay. Now we go on to the Prisma Checklist 2020, which is a list of 27 items previously mentioned, grouped into sections as follows. So you have your title, abstract, introduction, methods, results, discussion, and other information. Now, for the purposes of this lecture, we'll go over the parts, but I will be focusing on certain areas. So first, of course, is the title. It should include the words systematic review. Okay. Now, for the abstract, you have a separate checklist on that, which is a Prisma 2020 checklist, which I will be presenting later. So there's also a guide to follow in doing their abstract. For the introduction of your SR meta, it should explain the objectives explicitly and it should provide the rationale for doing the SR meta. Now, the meat is, of course, the methods of your SR meta and the results. Your discussion would then focus on the interpretation, limitations, and implications of your results. And as with your research papers, so you should provide information on registration support, competing interests, if applicable, and your sources and coding methods. Okay. So again, as mentioned, I will be focusing on certain areas, specifically the methods and the results. The other parts are a bit self-explanatory. So we'll just be going over these two aspects to clarify some things. So first is your method. So your method should present your eligibility criteria. So as I mentioned earlier, it should be exhaustive enough and transparent enough, unlike our government, to show you how studies were grouped. So you look into the PICO or the PICO structure and other characteristics as applicable. So in this example, they identify the population, the intervention, and the outcome. So there's no letter C here. Okay. So it can also do that if it's not relevant. So it could be a PO, PICO, okay, could also be a spider, depending on the type of research you want to do an SR meta on. Okay. Now, your method should also include your information sources. So, which databases you use, which registers, websites, organizations, the what, when, and how of your search. Should also describe explicitly or clearly your search strategy to enhance again transparency and improve replicability. So basically your goal here is to allow your readers to do their own search as well. So no gatekeeping of your methods. So this is an example of how you're going to do this. You can present this as such. In this particular example, they presented it as a table. Okay, they identified the databases here and the coverages or the years inclusive in the search. Okay, so it's very detailed, and you have to really describe your process. Next is your selection process. So you've already talked about how you did your data gathering or how you're going to do your sampling. Now you have to describe also your selection process. So how did you screen the studies? Who did the reviewing? How many reviewers? And you also describe how you collected data from the studies. And then you also state there who did what in the group. So if there are multiple reviewers, if you're a group who did an SR Meta, who did with who did what and how. Okay. And you should also include a description on your data items, specifically the outcomes and the variables that you considered in each studies that you included, in each of the studies you included in your review. Okay, so this is an example of, or rather examples of how you can do your study selection. Okay, now there's not one approach to this. You can do any approach actually, but here are some of the common approaches and disadvantages and advantages of each. So if you do it uh, by one reviewer one record per reviewer, or assessment of each record by one reviewer, it can be efficient, but again there's a higher risk of bias or missing relevant studies. If assessment of records is done by more than one reviewer, double screening can vary. And although this is more reliable than a single screener, it may increase your reviewing time or your selection time, since you have to resolve discrepancies among yourselves. You can also do priority screening to focus early screening effort on most relevant records. It increases efficiency, and basically it helps you systematize or formalize your process. Okay. Other methods, you can use machine learning classifiers, previous known assessments. Okay. So if ever there are other, uh, if there's rescreening, okay, so you can avoid the rescreening. And crowdsourcing, which basically involves a large group of individuals. So you can do whatever, or you can combine methods, or you can make your own depending. But again, you have to be very transparent about which method you're going to use. Okay, so this is an example of how you can write it. So here they specifically said there were three researchers reviewing the studies, and then they did it in pairs. And then they also discussed what they did in case of disagreements. Okay, so it has to be very detailed. So basically, you're telling the reader the story of how your systematic review came about. Okay, now this one is an example of a data collection process. Okay, so here they mentioned the use of a Review Manager 5 software, or the RevMan, which you can use for your systematic reviews and meta-analysis. There are, I think, other free applications or websites similar to RevMan if you can't find a copy. Okay. Now, one important thing about methods specifically for systematic reviews is the risk of bias assessment. Now, this is very crucial because basically a systematic review team is composed of humans, no, with different notions, with different backgrounds. So there's really a high risk of bias, starting with selection and search strategies, actually. So to avoid weakening your data because of the introduction of bias, there are certain methods. So you have to do risk of bias assessment. No? So you specify the methods used, And it's important for the readers to appropriately interpret the evidence. So by looking at your methods, they will be able to make their own conclusions or at least evaluate your data. Okay. It should include the details of the tools used, including details of automation tools used. So if you use software, you have to provide the details where you got it, what version, etc. And again, it's important to state how many reviewers assessed each study and whether or not they worked independently. Now, this is an example of how they did their risk of bias assessment. So they used actually a tool for this, which is called the risk of bias tool or the ROB tool, which is also by Cochrane. So you can use this. Okay. So basically, there are different um, risk of bias tools that you can use. So it's not necessarily just the Cochrane, but in most studies they use this one. So it addresses 5 domains according to this article. Okay, and then they describe how there were two review authors reviewing the studies independently. Okay. Now, when you report your risk of bias judgment, so there are different modalities, but usually they report it as levels like low, medium, high to reflect the risk of bias in the assessments. Okay. Now, other parts that should be or other aspects that should be included in your methods is what effect measures you looked into with the studies. Specifically, if you looked at the risk ratios, mean differences, or other statistical analysis. And you should also describe your synthesis methods, which are subjective judgments. It can be an informal or formal process. It could involve tabulations and coding. Okay. So you should be very clear on how you prepare data for presentation and synthesis, for meta-analysis, your effect estimates, and your methods to explore causes of heterogeneity among results and your sensitivity analysis. Okay, so these are examples. So in this example, they describe how they categorize the studies based on the interventions used. In this one, they describe um, the estimates they looked at. Okay. In this example, they describe their attempt at doing a meta-analysis. However, it could not be done because of an increased heterogeneity of interventions. Okay, so the variables. So the studies they were trying to do a meta-analysis on were too different or distinct that they could not integrate it. So they used albatross plots in this example. So you can be very transparent or very honest with your readers should there be quote unquote failures, no? So if you're unable to do certain analysis, it's okay. So this is an example of uh, studies wherein meta-analysis was used. So this is how you report. Okay. So again, it's very lengthy because they're very clear and transparent about it. Okay, so this is another one wherein they used meta-analysis also. And this is how they describe sensitivity analysis. Okay. Now, in reporting your bias assessment, methods to assess risk of bias due to missing results. So, in looking at studies, you may find that certain studies that were eligible for your review lacked certain data. Okay. So you have to describe um, the process or how you were able to assess risk of bias, even if there were missing variables. Okay. Next, your certainty assessment. So you report the factors considered and the criteria used to assess each factor. So here you look at precision, the sample size, okay, to show how certain or how strong the findings of each study are. So here, they basically describe what considerations they use to assess the certainty or the strength of the body of evidence, and they grouped it as high, moderate, or low, or very low. Okay, so basically they tabulated and they synthesized everything and presented it. Now for your results. Actually, for your results, basically, um, there are similarities with how you report your method. So you go back to how your study was selected. So that's actually part of your results, your study selection. How you were able to whittle it down from 10,000 to only 5. So that's also a part of your results. You also report the study characteristics in the same way you report demographics of a study population or sample. And of course, the risk of bias in studies. You can also report the results of individual studies, or you can report the synthesis of all the studies. And you should also report biases uncovered and the certainty of evidence, again, based on your analysis of the study parameters. Now you can present this your selection process through this flow diagram. Okay, so basically you want to show them that you started with this many number and how you were able to whittle it down. Okay, so it could be due to duplicate records, ineligibility, and for other reasons. So of course, for your other reasons, you have to explain it as well. Okay. You also put down how many records or articles you screened, which how many were excluded, those you wanted to retrieve. So for in the case of paid articles, okay, so you wanted to retrieve 20, but unfortunately, the authors are not replying or it's too expensive to retrieve. Or, for example, the article was removed for some reason. You put it here. Okay. Then you also report those you screen for eligibility and new studies included in the review. So, if for example you after going through this process find new studies, you also put it here. And then finally, report how many studies were included. Okay. Now, you can also report identification of new studies via other methods. So, in the same way, you would report identification of studies via databases and register. So, basically, you have to put how you were able to come up with a certain number of studies included in your review. Okay, so this is one way to report basically all the studies or a summary of the characteristics of the studies you included in your SR meta. So sometimes you start with 1,000 and then just end up with this number of studies based on your eligibility criteria. So you can actually report the demographics or the characteristics of your study as such. So again, they use the PEO, so the population exposure and outcome. So, and then whatever statistical analysis or numbers that you want to consider, you also put it here just so you can show the reader at a glance what studies were considered. Now, this is an example of how you report your risk of bias. So again, here in this example, they use the ROB 2.0 tool to assess the risk of bias for each of the included studies. Okay, so this is the how you can report it. So it could be low risk, high risk. Okay, Or you can also report your outcome variables through diagrams, okay, to show commonalities or differences on the results. Okay, so this particular study used risk ratios in their analysis. Okay, can also use mean differences, okay, to show at what spectrum the articles were leaning towards in with reference to your question probably. Okay, so this is how you report it. So it's quite similar actually to how you would do it in your research papers. So you basically report odds ratios, your confidence intervals, your p-values, etc., depending on the objectives again of your systematic review. Okay, so this is for sensitivity analysis. Again, they were very transparent here. So they would also state whether or not analysis could or but they were able to perform it. And of course, your certainty findings as well. Okay. Now, for the other parts, like your discussion and your other information, again, is a general interpretation of results. So again, your discussion should not be a repeat of your results. It should represent the limitations of your evidence, your review process, and the implications then of your results to current practice. Now, your other information or its equivalent is your appendices in your paper. So, whether or not your systematic review is registered in your protocol, whether you received support for your systematic review, any competing interests by the authors, or anything that you want to disclose for transparency, like your SALN, and availability of data, your code, and other materials. So you have to be very clear about this. Like, for example, how you did your coding, your categorizations, where you got your sources, your articles. Okay, so you provide everything in your other information. Okay, so this is now your another checklist by Prisma. So this one is for your abstract. So again, it's divided into parts: the title, your background, methods, results, discussion, and again, your other information. So it's self-explanatory actually. It describes what information should be present in each area. So this is an example of your abstract. And now we move on to how you're going to evaluate SR or meta. So for example, you're looking at SR meta articles that you want to report on or you want to use for practice. This is one of the tools that you can use. So actually, there's a lot of quality assessment tools. So this is a table presenting some of the commonly used. So these are the tools at the first column. The second column basically tells you how they assess the risk of bias and what are the categories by which they assess the risk of bias. Okay, don't worry, I won't be asking this in exam. I'm just presenting this for you to know. Okay, that there are a lot of other tools for systematic reviews, but for now we will focus on the AMSTAR, which stands for Assessing the Methodological Quality of Systematic Reviews. It is a tool used for the critical evaluation of systematic reviews of RCT. So, in clinical practice, we usually look at a lot of RCTs for medications, for other treatment, for laboratories or diagnostic tests. So, this is actually one of the more commonly used tools in healthcare, which is why this will be our focus. It's used to measure the effectiveness of interventions and allows you to evaluate systematic reviews for healthcare interventions, whether it's randomized or non-randomized. Okay, so now we go to the checklist, and these are the questions in the tool. Okay, so first, did the research question and inclusion criteria include the components of PICO or the PICO? Did the report contain explicit statements on the review methods? Did they explain their selection of study? Did they use a comprehensive literature search? And did the authors perform study selections in duplicate? It also asks whether or not there was data extraction in duplicate, the list of excluded and included studies in detail. Did they use a satisfactory technique in assessing risk of bias? Or did they report sources of funding or possible sources of coercion or bias through source for funding? Okay, so if meta-analysis was performed, did they use appropriate methods for statistical combination? Did they assess the potential impact of risk of bias? Did they account for risk of bias? And did the authors provide a satisfactory explanation for the heterogeneity or the differences in the results of the review? And lastly, if quantitative synthesis was done, did they carry out adequate investigation of publication bias or small study bias and discuss its likely impact on the results of the review? And did the authors report any potential sources of conflict? Now, as you can see, now looking back on the 16 questions, I hope 16 questions for Amstar. I hope you noticed that it was quite similar to the parts of the Prisma checklist as earlier discussed, specifically the method. So basically, if you follow the Prisma checklist in doing your systematic review as a guide, then basically when somebody evaluates your review using the Amstar checklist, then you'll probably be fulfilling the requirements or the criteria for doing a good systematic review. Okay, so this is the actual checklist. So as you can see, the questions are in blue. Okay, and it's very easy. Literally, it's a checklist. You check whether or not the PICO structure is there, and then if yes, you click yes for that particular question. So the goal here is to get as many yeses. The more yeses you get, the stronger the more systematic the review was. Okay, so I will be posting this particular checklist in Canvas. You can go through them. Again, I'm posting it or sharing it as reference in the future should you choose to use a systematic review or meta-analysis method for your research. Okay, so there, you can go through it. Okay, so these are the 16 questions. And if you notice, there are also options for partial yes. And in the case of meta-analysis, your if the studies being considered or the study you're looking at did not actually do a meta-analysis, there's also a check there. But basically, checking this option does not necessarily weaken the systematic review. It's just basically a sort of, if you would, a not applicable. Okay. All right. So that concludes our lecture, and these are my references. And I'd like to acknowledge the help of Dr. Wangko, Dr. Tolosa, and Dr. Akat Tukili, who provided their lecture slides from previous lectures. Okay. So again, thank you very much for your kind attention. I hope I was clear, and I hope that you were able to appreciate the process of doing an SR Meta. If you have any questions, kindly reserve them for the online Q&A, or if you're shy, you can email me in my email address as posted in this slide. And please do not forget to evaluate. You can use the link in Canvas, or you can scan the QR code now. Again, thank you very much for your time, and I wish you the best.